In this video, I'm going to be taking you through my research and projects I have created throughout this semester. First, my research goals throughout the semester: combine textile techniques with metal with the intent to explore form, experiment with color combinations to find visually striking/cohesive combinations, exploring the concept of abstractly representing emotions. The first piece I created during this semester is titled Overwhelmed. I am interested in representing personal emotion in jewelry. Overwhelmed was my next attempt at portraying this concept. For this piece, I wanted to make the stone itself look overwhelmed. Featured here is the picture of my first attempt at this idea, which combines wool with a white knitted enameled cage. After creating this sample, I began to rethink the design, and that was because there was not enough contrast between the enamel and the wool. The wool is supposed to be overwhelming a structure. However, both forms being organic in nature, the overall effect is confusing. I began to question a couple things. One, and the most important one, is what is structure? How can I represent structure in a piece of jewelry that's abstractly representing the emotion of feeling overwhelmed? And how readable should this piece be? Is it important to me that other people get the feeling of overwhelmed like I do, or should it be up for interpretation? Here are images of my second attempt. This was a small sample of what I was planning to scale up for my final project. When thinking about how to represent structure, I chose to represent it with a textile technique that I find to be organized and meticulous. What my first iteration of this project did well was the random bursting of the wool breaking out of this organized structure, so it was important to me to keep that aspect in the final design. When creating this sample, I explored coloring the cage red as well, but it took away the contrast between the structure and the wool. I mainly did it just so I could see what it would look like. Here is an in-progress image of my final project. You can see the structure created with sterling silver wire before the wool is added. I wanted the stone to be the same color as the overwhelming wool to represent the fact that we are often the cause of our own overwhelming feelings. I also did some research on other artists and how the idea of feeling overwhelmed is depicted in the art world. When thinking about other artwork that I personally find overwhelming, I found that it is an emotion I only feel with large pieces of art. When creating this brooch, I wanted the brooch to be large enough that it becomes the main focus when being worn on the body. I am also primarily interested in abstractly representing the emotion. I do not expect everyone to interpret the piece the same way. However, I do want to nudge the viewer in the right direction with a title. Here is my final piece titled Overwhelmed. You can see that the wool is overwhelming the stone and the structure, trying to contain it. The stone is a garnet, and I used 2 different colors of wool to add more depth. There is a darker red closer to the center and a lighter red on the outside. Here is the back of the piece. You can see the organized structure very clearly on the back. Here are a few images of sketches I created for this project. The goal for this project was to be inspired by nature, yet not directly mimic any specific plant or structure. During my fall semester, I really struggled with color combinations while enameling. So when exploring color, I was inspired by color combinations found in organisms such as lichen. For this sample, I was trying to replicate the green and teal seen on the photo of a lichen, but I could not achieve the desired colors due to the fact that I could not produce the right shade of teal. My work for this project combines textile techniques with traditional plique-à-jour techniques. So I take woven or crocheted copper wire, I enamel it with an opaque color, and then fill in all of the gaps with a translucent enamel. This is my second color sample that I turned into a pair of earrings. And after creating this sample on this piece, I decided this was the color combination I would use on my final project. This piece was created by crocheting 26 gauge copper wire to a cut piece of sheet metal for stability. Since I started combining textile techniques with enamel, I have begun exploring how to make my knitted forms more stable in the kiln to help prevent warping. The addition of the copper backing prevented the wire from losing its form when firing. This piece uses 4 different colors of enamel. I ombre 2 opaque colors and then used 2 different translucent enamels to produce the desired effect. And you can see on this progress photo, you can see the back plate and the crocheted wire before it's been enameled. The shape of each back plate was inspired by sandstone and lace lichen. I wanted to attach my enameled pieces to a sheet of silver, and I thought about cutting out holes in the silver that reflected the patterns created by the enamel. But after testing it out on pieces of tinfoil, I was against the cutouts because I felt like they took away from the reflection created by the enamel. And you can see that in these 2 progress images of one piece with the cutouts and one without. I thought the cutouts overall became too distracting. Originally, I wanted to attach a silver backplate to the enameled pieces because I wanted to reflect the light coming through the orange enamel, and you can see that in this image. However, the solder did not behave the way I intended and kept breaking throughout the construction process, resulting in my final piece not having the silver backplate. Here you can see my final project. Each of the enameled pieces are connected with jump rings. Christopher Adams' biomorphic forms have inspired my last project of the semester and projects in other classes. Similar to my work, his work is influenced by a variety of creatures, but none of them represent a specific organism. His ceramic forms challenged me to think about movement. In previous pieces, I was using a collection of soldered wires to create the sense of movement, when really I wanted to focus on the whole piece feeling like it was in movement. This was the result of that exploration. This is my final piece. It is a bracelet. I used the same textile technique I used for Overwhelmed to create this structure. For the color on this piece, I was experimenting more with powder coating because I think powder coating has a more desirable outcome than enamel does with this small of wire. And for this, I liver of sulfured my whole piece and then wiped off the high points and then enameled it with a transparent red to get more depth. And that is my project and research that I completed throughout the semester.